So we all know not to judge other people. The masters have told us that. Jesus has told us that, but it can be really hard at times to refrain from making judgments of people, sometimes subtle, sometimes more overt, or criticisms, just not understandings that we think we have that end up identifying them with their shadow self rather than their divine self with a capital S. And it's really bad business because it creates really bad karma. So in Matthew 7, which we just heard, it says so clearly, do not judge or you will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, and all the time there's a plank in your own eye, you hypocrite? First take the plank out of your own eye, then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. I once asked someone I admire a lot, how do you know the difference between when you're judging someone and when you're using discernment? He said, if you judge someone, you're basically identifying them as being that way permanently rather than seeing that they're currently exhibiting a certain behavior. So for example, you might say he's an egomaniac, or she's selfish, or he's a bad person, instead of he's acting from a place of ego, or she's acting selfish, or they're not living up to their fullest potential. So there's a difference in the permanence of the statement. But when you judge instead of discern, you're essentially helping trap people inside of unreality by identifying them with it permanently instead of just saying, this is the current behavior. So while this is a really good rule of thumb to keep in mind, even discerning how other people are behaving can be tricky business, because no one can know what's inside of someone else's heart. You can't know what's motivating his or her choices, or whether that person needs to go through something in the middle of it, something that might be messy or chaotic or not look so elegant or spiritual, but sometimes they need to learn a lesson. And that person's soul needs to expand and grow into God reality in whatever way that person chooses and is chosen for them. And so you never really know, right? If two people are behaving in a way because they have some past karma that needs to be resolved, or maybe they need to be reunited with their twin flame and heal each other and the situation looks messy, or maybe it's something where just to us it doesn't make sense or doesn't look holy. But if we make that snap judgment, then we are interfering essentially with the path that that person needs to take, and we could be essentially interfering with their evolution, their soul's evolution. So only God knows the heart, and God only knows the heart. So while we can aspire to discern God reality from the energy veil, and that's a good thing to do, it's really tricky business when we think we have all those answers, especially since you can make some pretty bad karma by interfering with another person's process or using your life force to essentially kind of trap them inside of a less than divine circumstance with your fixed thoughts about them. We all know everything that we think and feel about other people is actually delivered to them energetically. So whether we think we've just had it an experience on our own, we've actually sent them that energy and they're going to receive it. And so even those thoughts we have about people that are a bit critical or judgmental are actually delivered to them, even if we don't do it verbally. And so it's kind of like in the superhero movies, when Iceman, he could freeze the objects in place, or like in the Chronicles of Narnia, when all those little creatures, the dwarves, the animals, the centaurs, the satyrs, they're all turned into those horrible ice statues by the witch. That's essentially what we can help do inadvertently when we're trapping people inside of, essentially freezing them inside of a state rather than leaving them a place of honor to stand on so that they can grow into their real self with a capital S. I know because I've done it. So I know I've seen people as permanent monsters of some version in the past, or permanent messes, and essentially spell cast them by doing it. And I've definitely had it done to me as well. I can tell you it feels awful. It feels awful to be seen as someone who isn't living up to someone else's expectations, or isn't capable of change, or isn't good enough, or isn't doing things the right way according to someone else's thought. And I'm sure we've all had experiences like this where people thought they were better than us. Maybe it was somebody from the country club who thought because they're rich and they run in these posh and hoity-toity circles, they're more important than you and everyone else. They maybe look down on people who can't, name the same notes in the wine they're tasting. Or maybe it's someone super fit who's looking down on us for not being in better shape, or someone with better fashion sense who thinks we don't dress well enough, or someone who's more book smart than us looking down on us for not being able to follow along with intellectual things or quote the same philosophers. But the really sad truth is that we've probably all had people look down on us for not being as close to God as they think they are, or as spiritual as they think they are, or for not being as far along on the path as they think they are, or not having it quote unquote right in some other way. I actually once got a talking to from someone in the teachings after I had turned an Archangel Michael decree into a kirtan song. And I came up with what I thought was a beautiful melody and sang the whole thing using all the words from the decree. And they came up to me after and said, hey, you can't really do that because you're changing the cadence and the tonality of what was intended in the decree, and it's meant to be given a certain way. And I never sang that song again. It was a song that really touched me deeply and had moved a lot of other people. One person that was at this performance actually said that they saw Archangel Michael descend over us when I was singing it, and I was too ashamed to ever do it again, which is on me. And maybe that person was right, or maybe I had violated the decree in a way I shouldn't have by departing from its intended delivery, even though it felt right in my heart. But maybe I was wrong to stop singing it because of that person's criticism. But either way, the point is that making that judgment of me for singing that song could have created some really bad karma for that very well-meaning Chela, I'm sure, especially because it did change the trajectory of my interest in singing that song and turning other decrees into songs. And I stopped doing it altogether after that. So I can tell you, as I'm sure you know, that being judged never feels good. Even if the other person is well-meaning and they're looking out for our best interest. And if we're to treat our neighbor as we would treat ourselves, right? The second most important commandment behind love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your understanding. This is not that. Judging people is not that. So the great divine director said, mankind's double standard of judgment would be most unwelcome if those who practice it were to become the victims of this duplicity. And how sad it is for everyone involved when we judge someone else's commitment to God or the path of the masters. I can hardly think of anything sadder for both people involved. Because identifying people with their shadow self instead of their divine self is ultimately like the great divine director says, taking out old photo albums and prints reflecting earlier immaturities and showing these snapshots or snap judgments to others and saying, see how they really are. This is what he tells us in the dictation for March 21, 1965, volume 8, number 12. He said, the magnificent statement, judge not that ye be judged, when applied, becomes a great safety valve of protection to the user. Countless followers of Christ audibly support his great admonition, but when it comes to daily practice, they continue to express criticism, condemnation, and judgment in the most brittle, mechanical manner. They do not take into account the recorded debit to their life stream for such acts and the resulting energy, which can become an oppressive weight when it returns to them for balance. And as Elizabeth Clare Prophet said on April 22nd, 2001, in volume 44, number 16, to judge another is to take a great risk. For whatever accusation or judgment we met out, we must bear the energy of that concept. Do we judge someone to be a thief or a liar? Then we have to transmute the burden of the world momentums of the thief and the liar. The reason we cannot judge is because judgment takes place on many planes of consciousness. What here appears to be injustice may be divine justice on another plane. If you could but behold karmic circumstances, the working out of energy coils and energy patterns, the opportunity for souls to learn to reap what they've sown, the 7 levels of awareness through the 7 major chakras will reveal to us another aspect of the law of justice concerning any matter that occurs between men. To me, therefore, men ought to run in every judgment and ought not to lean on their own opinion. How dangerous it is to lean on our own opinion. So if you overstep when you're trying to give people unsolicited or sometimes even solicited advice where they ask for your opinion, but they haven't yet gotten to the place where they're ready to receive the answer in its fullness, you can make bad karma because you're interfering with the process, right? And their learnings and the lessons they need to grasp in order to grow. And if you try to save them against their free will, which can look like an act of kindness, you might inadvertently actually delay their ability to evolve and ascend because you interfered with their divine lessons and timeline. I think a lot of times we try to change people or worry about their progress, where they are on the path or in their learnings, from a place of needing to control them, right? Which is less than divine. And that might be because something about the way they're behaving confronts something in us. We think we need them to change so we can feel better, or it might be because we want them to behave in a certain way or validate choices we've made and make us more comfortable with ourselves, right? Also might be because in them not following our ideals, then they make us question whether we're doing the right thing. But whatever the reason is generating that need to sort of, step and interfere with someone else's process, there's usually some kind of insecurity behind it. When we're trying to control or manipulate someone, there's something ultimately that we think we need from them to be whole. And of course, that's always false. I have a friend who's a trained therapist and very, very well-meaning. He loves to give his friends tough love and correct them when he sees they're doing something that could be self-destructive. And he's generally really perceptive, but he does make some snap judgments of people and thinks he can kind of read anyone and figure them out. And for months, he kept telling me that I needed to have more of a relationship with myself. And I never understood what he meant, never resonated with me, didn't really seem relevant. And I started to find it really frustrating because I thought, you're not seeing me. You're not, even the feedback I'm giving is telling you this isn't working for me, but it's ignored, right? And so I ended up feeling judged, even though he was really trying to help. And rather than helping, it kind of became discouraging to me. So I found myself trying to undo this thought that he kept putting in my head over and over. And I was ruminating on it a lot more than I should have been. And essentially, it ended up kind of feeling like I had to dig out from under the spell that he inadvertently cast on me while trying to be helpful, and literally felt like I had to unthaw from this judgment he cast on me over time and kind of reset. So the great divine director goes on to say, let it be clear that it's not in the outer realm that men and women of goodwill ought to make value judgments concerning their fellow men. I think that I have no difficulty in distinguishing between the true and false. Hence, I can easily perceive the degree of spiritual radiance and all its glory pouring through their flesh forms. I think, however, that even presently I should cringe at the thought of being judged. And yet I am sure you realize this is not fear of man's criticism or opinion, but rather solicitude for the individual who is guilty of this error. For mankind have developed a deep set of stereotyped and acceptable values, which they carefully preserve as in a closet, drawing them forth periodically and inserting these hard-backed cards into a stereotypicon for recurrent viewing. Thus, criticism has become a parlor game in which men amuse themselves at the expense of others, not realizing that by doing so, they widen the moat that separates them from the great divine realities of life. Why review evil when you can amplify the power of good? Stereotyping has become very mechanical. Civilization finds it only too easy to assassinate the character and service of our best servants. We've noted in cosmic history that wherever we have established focuses for the freedom of man, the powers of intolerance have attempted malicious devaluation before men. This includes the circulation of partial truth, lies, fabrications, and the struggling few, not always securely rooted in an understanding of the dangers in the battle of life, are sometimes unhorsed. The seemingly innocent practice of holding wrong concepts about others, of judging others, of assessing their level of attainment or possibility is all a part of vain competition and results in grave misunderstandings. You see, when the hidden hungers of the soul for advancement remain unsatisfied, they sometimes burst out as unbalanced energy, which takes the form of gossip and the downgrading of others as a substitute for inner God security. I'm going to read that again because it's really important. You see, when the hidden hungers of the soul for advancement remain unsatisfied, they sometimes burst out as unbalanced energy, which takes the form of gossip and the downgrading of others as a substitute for inner God security. Herein lies the very subtle activities of the brothers of the shadow who seek to impugn the pure in heart by drawing down the pall of ignorance, confusion, and questioning about the person and character of another. Some of this is like taking out old photo albums and prints reflecting earlier maturities and showing these snapshots or snap judgments to others and saying, see how they really are? While the great divine opportunity called life moves onward, men attempt to methodically yet mechanically thwart the progress of another soul, and by the law of returning karma, do but hinder their own progress. Beloved El Morya also said on September 22, 1991, in volume 34, number 45, judge not by the condition of anyone's human. Look further to the depths of the soul and make allowances for moments when anyone may be tired, may utter the thoughtless remark, or forget something that's important. We understand these things. We have moved in this world. Those who expect perfect human beings will not join any organization or be part of any group endeavors until they find the perfect people. They're in danger of losing their souls, for they are idolaters. No one is perfect in the human condition. I found this passage really interesting because I actually know a Christian couple who first went to an evangelical church and then went to a Baptist church and then went to a different kind of evangelical church and different Baptist church, all in the same little town. And the reason they kept leaving was they felt like the pastor didn't have it right. And they didn't like the vibe of the church. And so eventually they kind of did a whole circuit of the churches and decided none of them were good enough. Stopped going to fellowship with other people in person because no church was good enough for them. The great divine director goes on to say, let us have balance, beloved, and let your minds not be overcome with the energy veil of judgment. For I tell you, unless you let go of your judgment of anyone on the path, yet retain your Christ discrimination to hold the balance for anyone else's weakness, unless you let go of judgment, I will tell you what will come upon you. The fires of hell themselves will be released to you, unleashed to you in your own judgment. Let me read that one more time. The great divine director says, let us have balance, beloved, and let your minds not be overcome with the energy veil of judgment. For I tell you, unless you let go of your judgment of anyone else on the path, yet retain your Christ determination to hold the balance for anyone's weakness, unless you let go of judgment, I will tell you what will come upon you. The fires of hell themselves will be unleashed to you in your own judgment. This is truth, beloved, for judgment is a weighty matter. Thus you find the teaching of Jesus Christ. Judge not, lest ye be judged, for with what measure ye, it shall be measured unto you again. I have written on the momentum of criticism, condemnation, and judgment. Beware of its subtlety in your mind. Beware of its subtlety in your pride. Walk in another's moccasins. Literally, beloved, if you're critical of someone, take on yourself the penance. Ask that one's holy Christ self and the lords of karma to give you that one's moccasins for 24 hours. See how you feel bearing that one's karma and burden. And see how you come to know what striving your brothers and sisters may have in their hearts that you do not see, whereby they accomplish their daily tasks against odds you know not of, and conditions in the body that try them. Yes, beloved, I suggest if you are of the bent of the carnal mind that does continually judge others, that you cease it at once. Else I shall have to remove you from my community of chelas. For all who hold this vibration maintain a direct tie to hell, and that hell will one day rise up in them. And how will they cast it down when they have created the conditions whereby this hell should overtake them? So how do we examine in our lives where we might be judging others, and how do we stop, right? So I found a really interesting blog by Happy Rubin where he gave 17 tips on how to not judge other people. Number one, don't look at the conditioning, but look at the human being. So when you see a person for his or her past, you aren't really seeing that person. You're interacting with their conditioning, but that's not who they are. So never say or think, you remind me of this person, or, oh, you're one of those. I know your type. Number two, don't confuse people's unconscious behavior with who they are. Did someone do something bad like lie? Well, think of lying as an undesirable behavior. Don't let that say anything about who they are permanently. And try to mention the good in people whenever they've done something bad. Number three, get rid of your mind. You can also achieve non-judgment by calming your thinking. So your experience is different if you don't interpret what you see for a moment and you just see it. Number four, don't mislead yourself with stories and thoughts from the ego. So stick to the facts by staying in the here and now. Situations don't make you unhappy. They can, at most, give you physical pain, but thoughts are what make you unhappy, as do the interpretations and the stories that you tell yourself around those thoughts. So it's often in the form of complaining that this takes place. This proves us right and the other wrong. And it puts us in a position of fabricated superiority because the ego needs these created enemies to feel better about itself. So instead, if you're experiencing suffering or unhappiness and problems, do the following. Stay in the now. Unhappiness, thoughts, stories, and problems can't survive there. Suffering only starts when you label situations as unwanted or bad, or when you detest a situation. But without those stories, we're fulfilled. So anytime you're in a situation, stick to the facts. I fell in the mud, in the rain. I missed the plane. The cup's broken. Don't judge this situation as bad, good, or painful. You can accept that moment with everything that happens in it. And then when you do that, enormous forces are released. Number 5, stop labeling. What's mental labeling? Well, your mind cannot know a tree, only facts and information about a tree. So my mind cannot know you, only facts and judgments, labels and opinions about you. But when you put labels on something, it becomes more and more dead. So when you label, you say, oh, okay, now I know what it is. And then you miss the depth, you miss the mystery, you miss its essential reality. And you do it to yourself too. So you attach concepts and labels to who you think you are. And then you miss the depth of your own real self and your own being. Number 6, practice non-judgment. Even if you think you're not judging, it could be that you're still doing it a little bit. All you have to do is accept the reality of this moment. So yes, there may be pain, but not the story around it. So be careful, don't dive into that story, and stick to the simplicity of what's there. State the situation, this is the situation, but don't add anything to it. Don't give it a narrative. And when you judge, keep in mind that you make your world smaller. You become blind to what can actually be experienced. You shut yourself off from the development and growth, and you become less colorful, less alive. Number 7, assume everyone's doing their best. If you assume that everyone's doing their best, you'll find that you lost judgment for them. Instead of fighting that dark, you can help them bring the light. Number 8, ask questions. When you ask questions, you bring more actual information to the surface so that the stories and judgments no longer have a chance to survive. So actually my COO is really good at doing this. So anytime that she's about to have a difficult conversation with someone, she comes to the table with something that she thinks, but she doesn't want to let that inform the whole dialogue. And so she always starts by saying, how did that feel to you? Or how did that meeting go? Or what do you think about how this situation unfolded? And then she lets that person come to the table and talk, which arms her with more information that she might not have had before, to make sure she's really talking to that person where they are, and that they're coming together and interpreting a situation from a mutual place that can be made better. So number 9 is observe. Observe and experience what occurs in the here and now. Without wanting to change it, you look at your own feelings, your physical sensations, your emotions, your thoughts and events. And if you do that with someone else and observe everything, you can see and hear without interpretations of it. So learn to sit back and observe. Not everything needs a response. Number 10, be aware when you're judging. It's really powerful to just become aware of something you're doing. It pretty much ensures that 90% of the work is done because you've already seen that you're doing it. And then it makes it really easy to stop. So just being aware of your judgment is almost enough to stop it. If necessary, you can go a step further and become aware of the question. Where does that judgment or thought come from? Is it from school? Is it from church? Is it from a TV program? Is it from social conditioning? Is it from my upbringing? But that first step is just awareness of your thoughts, and that can be enough to stop it. Number 11, understand the other. Do your best to understand the other instead of judging the other. Put yourself in the other person's shoes and allow others to travel. Each person learns his or her lessons through his or her own life path. So keep your unsolicited advice and judgments to yourself. Number 12, see how your judgment is just a reflection of yourself. The world is your mirror. Everything you say says something about yourself. Your judgment says nothing about the other person, but it says a lot about you. And as soon as you judge less, then you'll start to notice other people are judging you less. Number 13, develop the trait of proactivity. Proactive people don't judge because they always have a choice between two things. If they can do something about a situation, then they do something about the situation. If they can't do anything about the situation, then they accept the situation. So these proactive people don't judge and complain, but they act themselves to get it done. Number 14, train yourself in acceptance. Accept the person for who he or she is and accept the situation as it is without wanting to change the person or the situation. Number 15, this is such a good one. Always return to love. Love the other, love yourself, love the situation. Always return to love. Think for 1 second, God created this human being. This person is also from God. This person is a part of God. This person is God. If you're insulting this person with your judgment, you're insulting God. Number 16, exchange your expectations for appreciation. We become really unhappy when reality doesn't match our expectations. I am guilty of this as well. But if we don't have high or low expectations and we can instead replace those with appreciation and gratitude, then we can be grateful and appreciate everything that happens. It helps us be detached from our expectations, and then that way we don't see that people are never enough. Number 17, leave your unsolicited advice and opinions at home. Keep your opinions and advice to yourself. Has anyone asked for your opinion, advice, or judgment? If not, keep it to yourself. And even when people ask, stay humble and modest. You may feel the need to respond to something at certain times. For example, on social media, I know sometimes people can get wrapped up thinking, oh, I have to chime in here and, set everybody straight. And I have to get, make sure everybody is understanding this correctly. But when there are things that you don't agree with or think are wrong, why do you think you need to let them know that? Why can't you keep it to yourself? Is there something that we need to know that why do we need to think, why do we need to know what you think about something is what I'm trying to say, right? So when you see someone in a certain light and you don't recognize the God in them, but instead you fixate on the unreality they're currently out picture, you're essentially trapping them right inside that reality instead of leaving that place for them to grow into who they're meant to be. And so let us join together now and just taking a moment to reflect on where those subtle energies of judgment, criticism, condemnation, even little micro versions of it are showing up in our consciousness, so we can cleanse ourselves of that unreality and replace it with love and transmute it. Won't you join me now by asking the great divine director to help us to replace our judgments with this divine love? Dear beloved Jesus Christ, Heavenly Father, beloved great divine director, thank you for this teaching today, for the beauty of your words and helping us understand it. Please help us to pluck out any seeds of that judgment of others, criticism, condemnation we have floating around somewhere in our consciousness, so we can let it go and accept that breeze of the Holy Spirit coming into us for transmutation, that violet flame, saturating us with that violet flame, that we might experience this alchemy and come into complete alignment with our Holy Christ self and the example of non-judgment set so beautifully before us by our beloved Jesus Christ. And I ask for this to be done according to God's holy will. Let it be done. It is done. Amen.